everyone. We will move on to the 14th session of Unit 2 Research Methodology and Statistics. In this session, we will be discussing about techniques of sampling. With regard to the recap of previous class, we have discussed about sampling design, that is the basic concept, population and sampling. The learning objective of this session is to understand the techniques of sampling. When we discuss about techniques of sampling, there are two types of sampling techniques, that is random sampling, which is also known as probability sampling, and the second one is non-random sampling, which is also known as non-probability sampling. Coming to random sampling, as I mentioned earlier, probability sampling is also known as random sampling or chance sampling. Under this sampling design, every item of the universe has an equal chance of inclusion in the sample, that is to be included in the sample. For example, a lottery method in which individual units are picked from the whole group, not deliberately but by some mechanical process. Here it is a blind chance alone that determines whether one item or the other is selected. The results obtained from probability or random sampling can be assured in terms of probability. Coming to another method of sampling, that is non-random sampling, which is also known as non-probability sampling. This sampling procedure does not afford any basis for estimating the probability that each item in the population has of being included in the sample. Coming to random sampling techniques, we shall discuss about some of the techniques such as simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling. Okay, coming to simple random sampling. In this method, the entire process of sampling is guided by chance procedure. It is the most scientific of sampling methods and is the model on which scientific sampling is based. However, it is not commonly used in social sciences and the humanities. This is because it can lead to unrepresentative samples in circumstances in which diversities in the population have to be meaningfully reflected in the sample being drawn up. Coming to the second technique of random sampling, that is systematic sampling. In some instances, the most practical way of sampling is to select every fifth item on a list. Sampling of this type is known as systematic sampling. Here, an element of randomness is introduced into this kind of sampling by using random numbers to pick up the unit with which to start. For instance, if a 4% sample is desired, the first item would be selected randomly from the first 25 and thereafter every 25th item would automatically be included in the sample. Thus, in systematic sampling, only the first unit is selected randomly and the remaining units of the sample are selected at fixed intervals. Although a systematic sample is not a random sample, in the strict sense of the term, but it is often considered reasonable to treat systematic sample as if it were a random sample. Coming to the third type, that is the stratified sampling with regard to random sampling techniques. If a population from which sample is to be drawn does not constitute a homogeneous group, stratified sampling technique is generally applied in order to obtain a representative sample. Under stratified sampling, the population is divided into several subpopulations that are individually more homogeneous than the total population. The different subpopulations are called strata, and then we select items from each stratum to constitute a sample. Since each stratum is more homogeneous than the total population, we are able to get more precise estimate from which each stratum, and by deciding more accurately each of the component parts, we get a better estimate of the whole. In brief, we can tell that stratified sampling results is more reliable and detailed information. Coming to the fourth type of random sampling technique, that is cluster sampling. If the total area of interest happens to be a big one, a convenient way in which a sample can be taken is to divide the area into a number of smaller non-overlapping areas and then to randomly select a number of these smaller areas, which are usually called clusters, with the ultimate sample consisting of all units in these small areas or clusters. Thus, in cluster sampling, the total population is divided into a number of relatively small subdivisions, which are themselves clusters of still smaller units, and then some of these clusters are randomly selected for inclusion in the overall sample. To summarize this session, we have discussed about the types of sampling techniques, that is random and non-random, but in this session we have only discussed random sampling types or techniques. Thank you.